That position too, if you remember, when we were applying for the first Safer grant, we had an extra person. The reason we had an extra person, if you remember, is because we had someone retiring and was off on injury leave and wasn't coming back. We knew they weren't coming back. So in an effort to cut down on overtime, we hired a person to fill that person's role, right? So we're paying an hourly wage versus an overtime wage to fill that person's position. At the same time, we did the Safer grant application. On the Safer grant application, you have to list everybody, the roster of the fire department, everybody that's working in the fire department. And you can ask Beth, she sees this too, when she turns in the payroll side of that. You know, if someone leaves, we have to replace them. That's the rules of the Safer grant, and we have to maintain that out through the period of performance. So when we did that, then we got the Safer grant, which wasn't predictable. You know, they're hard to get. We didn't get one, we ended up getting two. But we got the Safer grant. Well, we had to maintain that staffing level. So on one shift, then let me fast forward a second. So 2 years later, we have an opportunity to get another Safer grant. We decided to hire 3 people. So we hired 6 on the first one, 3 on the second one. And the second one is 100% reimbursement for 3 years. So we went ahead and we moved forward with that, and council voted on that, and you know, I brought that before you guys. So we had one shift that had 11 people on it, and 2 shifts that had 10 people on it, because we had that extra person. So that's when we talked about, you know, I think we talked about it in here in this room, you know, concerns that I had for the future of the fire department. Yeah, we're very young. We have a bunch of young people. We hired a bunch of young people all of a sudden. You know, we have to train those people. We need to give those people experience, you know. And then the other thing that I was concerned about is the succession plan. When I walk out the door in 4 years from now, when I got this job, it was, here's the keys, I'm ready to retire, see ya. That was the information I got. A little bit rougher deal than that, but that's what we'll call it tonight. This way, this person has an idea of what's going on in the operations of the fire department. It'll be a tested position still, because it has to be by civil service. The captains will be able to take the test as well. You know, not saying that person is going to get the job, but we have someone in that position that knows the operations of the fire department. And every day, Matt Clark gets a little bit more and a little bit more, you know, and that's the goal with that position. But we didn't hire an extra person to do this job. We moved as an extra person. So now we have 3 shifts of 10, the assistant chief, the captain of the inspection bureau, myself, our ambulance billing administrative assistant, and Paula is a part-time, and a part-time maintenance, building maintenance.
Thank you.
Mr. Hogg, do you have a question?
You mentioned insurance services office. Does this position add points toward that class 1 we're working toward?
Absolutely. One of the things that I alluded to there was our not having a designated training officer, fire training officer. ISO does not care about EMS. That's not what their scope of administration is. It's just the fire side of fire suppression. This person is our fire education coordinator. So yeah, absolutely is.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
The health director, Peg Jacobs.
Okay, if you don't mind, can I sit here and all these?
Yeah, by all means, please.
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about ordinance 5. Maybe I've done things confusing. I'll take some responsibility for that. I have 4 people that I've asked to be put on the ordinance for consideration for an increase next year when they have longevity in their jobs, and I submitted that to the mayor back in February. 3 of those positions out of 4 are not new. 2 are replacement positions for my employees that left, and we hired in new. But the position's not new, they're just new. And the other one was Dana Fischio. She was already in place as our accreditation coordinator. As everyone should be aware, I've been here enough about national accreditation was a mandate of Governor Kasich and put in place back in 2013. We lobbied against that mandate for quite a while. Our board was not in favor of that, along with a lot of other health departments across the state. But nevertheless, it became very apparent that we had to do accreditation. And part of that requirement is to have an accreditation coordinator. And that's when Dana came on board back in 2020. This past fall, we had an opportunity to obtain a $180,000 grant called Public Health Workforce Development. I know there was discussion here at council about that. I had given a summary to John Zuckel to bring back to council to explain it. And that $180,000 was because that came out of the CDC to the state because we became acutely aware that public health has been funded for so long that when we had a global pandemic, it became obvious. So this was to enhance public health, and half of the funds had to be spent on a new hire. 50% had to be spent on a new hire. That's when, and the other 50% to save from hiring 2 new people, we were able to reassign Dana to a new position, and we call her the Workforce Development Coordinator. So she's been in place since 2020, but we were able to pay her out of this grant, the other half of the grant. So we approached our Board of Health about approving that position for the bilingual health educator. And the reason we picked that position is because in the process of seeking accreditation and going through all the documents and requirements of the standards, which is quite large, in case you're not aware, we uploaded over 400 documents when we submitted our application in August of 21. So it became, during the process of accreditation, over and over throughout the standards, it was relayed to us that we had to meet our community's needs. And we have a growing Latino population in our community. We had difficulty communicating sometimes with these folks. If they brought someone with them that had some limited English, that was a good day. We had also contract interpreters, which was an additional cost to our budget as well. So when we were able to hire a bilingual health educator with that other half of the funding, we were quite ecstatic about that. We went through the process. We asked the board for approval. We have a job description, which I gave Mr. Sullivan Wright, and we were able to pay her and French's through 23, June of 23. The discussion we're having with the State Health Department is there is more funding to come behind that. So this should be a long-term position.
Okay.
Any questions?
Ms. Ramos?
I'm a little confused about, I understand you combined Dana with the accreditation with the workforce development,
Coordinator.
but could you explain the workforce development part? Because I work in workforce development, but my meaning is different, I think, than.
I'm sure. So a State Health Department, as it happens with the State Health Department, gave us about 24 hours to come up with a budget. And we had to submit that budget in the after May. So the Workforce Development Coordinator, if you looked at her job description, she is to help us enhance workforce by finding opportunities for more training. The budget does allow for to pay for training, and we're actually going to send her, Dana, to the Leadership Tuscaroras, which is a class, a big class, a year-long class, to help her really develop professionally. Again, like Jim said, I look, Dana is a wonderful find. She's in her master's program for public health. She will finish up in August of this year. She also has a master's in business. So we're very, very fortunate to have her, and she's helped coordinating training for all of the staff. She is tracking those trainings, any continuing ed credits. That is hers. The budget, she's overseeing, how the budget is being spent and keeping us on track. Anything we don't spend, it's all reimbursed. If I have to spend it first, then I submit my billing to the county health department, which is the fiscal agent, when they reimburse us for that. Anything that we have left over has to go back. I'm hoping that we won't. Spend it all. But that's her duty, her job description, that she's to coordinate that workforce, and she's to continue to be our accreditation coordinator. We're waiting on the site visit from the National Accreditation Board.
So it's really workforce development in your department?
In our department.
Okay.
Yeah, in public health. That was the intent of the funding, is to enhance public health, because during the pandemic, we found out where we really lacked. Because of being underfunded, our budgets were always very, very tight, and we didn't have funds to send people to train and to develop them.
Thank you.
Just a couple questions. So with that, once the accreditation, everything is finished, does that, because the purpose of this is looking at setting salaries and setting it to a scale, once these accreditations are finished, does that then push that salary up further? Is it a different title, or does that all fall within, growing within that said position?
Accreditation is here to stay. Once we become accredited, the site visit has to happen. We have to see if we pass all the areas of the standards, the standard documents. From just the template is almost 300 pages long. Once we pass accreditation, 5 years from now, we have to apply for re-accreditation every 5 years from now until the end of time.
Well,
So that her job will never end in the accreditation part, and the workforce development, as long as the funds continue, we will continue to grow our department in all the ways we can, including education and training.
okay. With a lot of the grants, I know we had talked the other day, but specifically just with a lot of the new money is coming in, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of overall funding, because just specifically want to focus on the salaries in itself. I mean, how much has the department grown, and do you see the full need for the full-time positions continuing? I mean, does anything, as it gets less, as we get out of the pandemic in a way, do those duties shrink at all? Is there things that are specific to COVID that your department's doing that may not be there in a year or two, or is everything now working towards growing the department altogether?
I appreciate that question. As clearly as I can tell you is I so look forward to growing our department. We've been here 167 years. We've had 6 employees for most of that, the longest I can remember, until we had Dana, the 7th person, and Tati's the 8th. I don't see us growing anymore for now. We're out of space anyway. So, but having a Tati is going to help enhance our department long after COVID, because we're able to serve our Latinos and non-English speaking clients now. And we're seeing that the appointments growing, and those residents coming in more and more. And, they pay their fees just like everyone else. They're very good about that. And so I'm hoping that our department continue to grow, and our services will grow, and, we see it now.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I had a quick one.
Yeah.
So Vicky, I know that you said something, I can't find it right now, with the amount on it, but how much is the city subsidizing the health department?
Well, every year it varies, depends on services, depends on grants that are available to us. I'm always looking for ways to increase funds. We're negotiating right now with the state health department about food licenses. We had to reassign, every health department across the state reassigned people starting in 2020 when COVID hit. They sent their environmental health folks to help with COVID surge. And so, 80,000 less out of the city council's budget. We're